All right, everybody do 5 push-ups. So we're into Windows attacks. That is the new black. So this is me. These are my kids. They're awesome. I'm sorry, but they're more awesome than you. Just admit it. Go on.
That's me. Sure, so here's what we're going to talk about. Tricks and misconfigurations that you can commonly see as a user that can kind of help you elevate privileges. Escalation from admin to system, persistence, forced authentication, and miscellaneous cool tricks that Rob came up with. Got really quiet.
All right, so this is pretty much just a continuation and add-on and more to Brent Moore's RuxCon talk. I would highly suggest you watch, view, and absorb everything he talks about in that talk. It's an amazing talk. So we're just kind of rehashing some of it and adding to it and putting our little spin on things.
Yeah, it's definitely not a replacement for it. So everyone's got the old school local exploit. We love those, right? Most of those nowadays are baked into core Canvas and Metasploit. Normally not an issue to not have an exe, but if you've ever been stuck in a situation where you're only getting like Dave's HTTP shell out where you only have command.exe, it can be kind of a pain in the ass when you got to run everything through a framework, but generally not an issue. Keyloggers, who uses keyloggers? Not that many people. So I think most of us know that you have to be system if you want to do the whole win logon capture. But if you just want to run one of those userland ones, typically throughout the day, a user's going to have to enter in those domain credentials into one or many things. And you, as a regular user, you can typically get the domain creds. That's pretty much what you want most of the time anyway.
Single sign-on is fun.
All right, cool. So common things, I think you've probably seen this. We may have talked about this last year. Common useful type files that you're going to look for once you're on a box. .configs and passwords.txt and lunch.txt and all those other happy ones. Who looks for sysprep? A couple people. You should do that. So there's 2 examples there. One has clear text and you don't usually find that one, and the other one has base64.
Encrypted.
It's encrypted, base64 encrypted. And the other one that I run into quite a bit is you've got a lot of organizations that are actually using TrueCrypt, using PGP drives. But what's the deal when those are mapped? When you've mapped that in TrueCrypt, what's up? Right, you just CD into it because it's acting like a drive. So if they're just using that thing all day, that's really an encryption at rest kind of thing, and all the good stuff that they should be keeping in there is readily accessible. So it's worth looking for.
Like keys.
Metasploit has a whole bunch of post modules that will actually look for those things for you. So since no one else uses any of the other tools, you can, that's not fair. We do, but yeah, we're Metasploit fanboys. Next.
So group policy. This has been talked about quite a bit, but who actually looks for group policy every time they get their first shell? Yeah.
You should do that every time.
The great thing is, for anyone who hasn't looked at it, it encrypts with AES a password that you set for a shared drive, right? Or a share, or a registry setting, or whatever in group policy you set for all of your users or a specific group of your users. It encrypts it with AES, but MSDN has the documented key for it. So, free passwords. And this has been talked about quite a bit, so it's not any little bit. Unattended installs. Just like sysprep, you're looking for unattend.xml. Who looks for those? Lots of people, yeah. Okay, so that has the password. What about on the server side? Anyone look for the server side? Yeah, so those unattend.xml has to come from somewhere. Has to be coming from somewhere. The problem with getting it from the disk is usually, in any recent versions of Windows, is it wipes that password out of that unattend.xml on the users or on the built system. But if you pull it from the server that serves that up, it can't have it already wiped, so you get all of the fun stuff. And there just happens for the Windows deployment services that can do this, and there's a lot of services that can. there's already a Metasploit module that can connect to the DCRPC pipe, pull out all of the configurations, just not the one you're on. So if you have a configuration for XP, Windows 7, 2008, 2003, all of your servers and all of that, this Metasploit module pulls them all down and says, here are all your passwords. So Windows Deployment Services isn't a one-stop shop for unattended installs of boxes. There are a number of different places that do this because it was such a big thing. Landesk being one of them. If you can still find that unattend.xml, you're still golden. You just have to find it. It's a standard that all of them have to use. So, this wonderful encryption we talked about earlier. In the unattend.xml, it says plain text equals false. If you look at that unattended, it has this encryption. Encryption is beer flavor, thank you, sir. So, the encryption is that it's base 64 and then padded. So that pad is where it says password. So if you remove the password portion from the clear text of it, you now have the real password. Oh, and they even got really tricky about it. For the admin passwords, it says administrator password for the padding instead.
Does everybody see that? I mean, it's kind of important. You go and you can kind of miss that with the PW password thing. Look for that. It's been the saving grace in a couple of assessments for us.
So, configuration failures.
So, coming to this quite a bit, how many people have their user on their workstation, the domain account as a local admin?
Liars.
Yeah.
All liars.
There is like 2 honest people in this whole room, right? Really common, same thing for power user. You got to do a couple other tricks, but there's a link there, so later on you guys can check out all the basically power user equals admin type stuff. I've also seen on plenty of assessments where all domain users are local admins. Has anybody seen that? All right, I love that. I mean, easy day. And then I've also seen when a lot of times people will put, they're pretty good. You know, the local user's not an admin. The domain user that uses that workstation is not an admin, but they'll put the workstation security guys, the server security guys, the blah 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 security guys are all local admins. So now you have a couple hundred people that are local admins. So I really only need to find that one password one that's in that random security group. And the guy's only assigned his domain account, but he's still really elevated in the domain.
Active Directory is hard.
So bin's path service modification. Who's seen this before? Sweet, like 5 people. Man, you guys are learning. That's great. I love it.
This is all old stuff.
This is old stuff. This was in the other talk from like 3 years ago. So you can use that handy dandy string there. It will actually look for things that you can change the service path for. And so instead of it running the binary.exe, you can have it run a command. So then we stop the service and then restart the service, and then it runs and it adds our user.
So a lot of Windows stuff isn't vulnerable to this anymore. You find a Windows NT box, you're definitely going to find it. But what you find a lot, like say this Lenovo, bad permissions on all of their crapware that they have added to that system. So look for, if you ever find a base build for an organization, look through all of their enterprise crapware and see what has bad permissions on their custom stuff.
So I know no one can read that. That's a real world example of the River Technologies WebDrive example. So that does still happen in the real world.
Anyone want to admit that they use WebDrive? Okay, so AlwaysInstallElevated. Anyone ever heard of AlwaysInstallElevated? It's a way to circumvent the need for all of your users to be admins. Because they need to install stuff still, but I want to make it my whole enterprise secure so that they can still do their work, but I don't want them to be local admins. Well, AlwaysInstallElevated means that an MSI will automatically elevate through group policy settings or registry settings to install as administrator without having to do UAC or without having to be admin. Well, as an attacker, if I find this registry key enabled, this group policy enabled, and I'm any user on the box, I can go, oh, okay, I'll create an MSI file to do my stuff instead of trying to do it with a regular binary. And guess what happens? I get system. The craziest thing about this registry setting and this group policy setting is if you set it for a group policy for your whole domain, whenever a user logs in or whenever a computer reboots, it will get the HKLM and set that. And when the user logs in, it'll set the HKCU. When your security assessment comes around and says, this is a bad idea, and you disable it, guess what goes away? The HKLM. Guess what stays? HKCU. So if you ever have this installed, it's still around. Thank you. So missing autoruns. A lot of people look for malware places to run their stuff automatically, but they look into things of places they want to add stuff. Well, we all know that uninstallations of things always work perfectly, and there's never anything left behind, right? So if you look at the missing autoruns, or things where you find file not found, you can do crazy things, especially if that directory is permissioned incorrectly. So, for example, 1248, anyone know what a .sys does? As a user, I can write in that file because the BlueStack stuff sets the permissioning on the program files incorrectly. So what can I do from user level? What's the .sys do? Come on. It's a driver. Where do drivers execute? Kernel. So, bypassing system altogether, I go from user with no permissions to kernel. Awesome.
So another old issue, service quoting, but you still run into it all the time. So this fancy string up there requires admin access on XP to run, and then for Vista Plus, it's any user can run that. And what that does is shows you basically the service names that are not quoted. Oh, I can push the button, that's right. So an example of one that is correct is Skype. The C program files x86 Skype updater is in quotes. So because there's a space in the program files x86, Windows will correctly parse that, and I can't shove anything extra in there. An example of a vulnerable one, thanks to Lenovo, is all their stuff gets installed unquoted. So in this case, this is a vulnerable example.
Anyone see the article about how the U.S. government will not buy Lenovo's? That was hilarious. I know why.
I know where a secret base is. That's not fun. Anyway, so kind of.
We're talking about all the Lenovo's.
Oh, is that why they?
Yeah.
All right. That's an easy fix. Anyway, so the kind of the Lenovo example is at the bottom, where that's the path: C program files, Lenovo, communications utility, TP key, and serve. So the ones that we can possibly use are program.exe, which Windows tends to bitch about. Correct. And then one that's more likely to work is the C program files, Lenovo, communications.exe. So if I can write my backdoor as communications.exe in that folder, when Lenovo, that program for Lenovo starts up, it executes my stuff.
Everyone gets how this works? If there's spaces in the path, it just goes, I can't understand that, and puts an exe after it. Thank you, Windows.
It's an old issue, but used it a couple times this year, so it's still out there.
All right, so DLL loading. I made a blog post on car knowledge a bit back, but this is H.C. Moore talked about DLL hijacking and all that kind of fun stuff. So this actually, what I'm going to talk about is still in a pull request. Is Egypt in here so I can smack him? Okay, cool. Until this actually gets in there, you can just pull it from the pull request. But this is essentially, you take any DLL on the target system, anyone, pretty much, and say, hey, I'm going to throw my shellcode into this DLL, and I'm going to re-upload it and patch it, so that when the DLL loads, I get my shellcode, and it still does what it's supposed to do. That's awesome.
Does that sound good? Does that sound useful? Okay.
So instead of having to load it from somewhere else, you can just say, I'm going to load it from the same place, replace it, and be fun.
A good tool. Anybody seen the Pentest Monkey tool to actually look for a bunch of these things? Really? All right, class is in session. Check it out. It's compiled Python. You can check it out and then recompile it if you don't trust him. But you can, it runs as the user that you are. So if you run it as admin, then it doesn't really help you. But when you're stuck as a regular user, this will actually find most of the things Rob and I have talked about along the way. You know, which folders are writable, which ones are unquoted, that sort of thing. It's worth checking out.
So, admin the system. Everyone knows getsystem, right? You see that -T1? Please do that, because if you don't do that, you will get, okay, it'll try the first one, then the second one, then the third one, then the fourth option. The fourth option is KitTrap, which is a local exploit that will pop up a wonderful banner on the user's desktop saying, hey, NTD VDM has crashed. But you'll see, oh, it didn't work. Just saying, if you want to stay a little stealthy, you might want to just T1 it.
Something I've ran into is when you don't actually have an interpreter, you're on a command prompt, and you're with a user that can do that. It makes you love interpreter because there's really not a way to do that without it that I know of. If anyone knows, let me know. But I was definitely stuck on a CMD.exe, and the guy was a local admin, but I couldn't actually get the system right. But I did eventually. But
yep. So PSExec-IS DCMD that allows you to, run interactive system. This is tried and true.
Because you're an admin, we can go back and replace binaries. So you replace any service that you want with a service-friendly binary that will say add a user. Stop the service, replace the binary, restart the service, the payload will execute, and then you can put the old one back and you're good.
Seeing a pattern? All right, WMIC, I love this. This is awesome. So WMIC allows you to run commands on remote host nodes without having to create or start or stop a service. So forensic evidence go away. I can now run things. So this domain admin is running process call create, VSSAdmin with shadows. The thing about WMIC running a process on a remote host is you don't get output, so you have to put it somewhere that you can read. So if you're a domain admin, all you do is, SMB client it to $, and you can now read your output if it's piped. But forensically, a lot less goes on there. AT, subject of the talk. Everybody knows how AT works, right? Yeah. So AT, the only problem with AT is, one, if you don't look at what the local time for the host is, you might be running a command the next day in Bangalore, whereas your local time for you is like 13:35. So always do net time the remote host to find out when its local time is. Can't tell you how many times I forgot to do that and was like, okay, 13:20's come around, damn it didn't work. AV must have got it. No, I'm just a dumbass. Yep. So whoami/groups is one of my favorite commands these days because it tells you the effective user or effective permissions that you have. So let's say in that earlier instance where there's a bunch of groups and another bunch of groups and another bunch of groups and this one esoteric group is the local admin group that's allowed local admins to the box. Well, if you look at your net local group administrators, you're never going to see your name in there, your current user in there. So if you do whoami/groups, it'll tell you that effectively, even though you're way down in this list somewhere, you are a local administrator, which is really helpful. I haven't found any other way to figure that out if there's a ton of groups like that.
So I pretty recently did a blog post on this because being stuck on the CMD.exe and not being able to do the get system prompted me to figure out a way to do this. So when Vista Plus, you can download the debugger for Windows 7 and above. So all of that class of systems, and those are kind of the two commands to run that. So we're still using @, and you could say, so at the time, I want to start the debugger, and the command will be syscommand. And then from another, you'll just let that run, and that basically starts a listener. And then from another console or another process, you can actually connect to localhost on syscommand, and you'll get a shell. Handy.
You can do this remote. You can do
Yeah, you can use Dave Kennedy's bypass UAC if you need to sometimes. If you're on a Win 7 box and that's getting a little grumpy with you, that will let you work.
It's free bind shell signed by Microsoft.
Yeah, it's handy. NTSD, you can also use that. That's already on like XP and below type systems. There's a Metasploit module that will do it for you. Then on the bottom there's a reference to a blog post Jason Haddix did on using it.
Schedule tasks. So AT was great. I learned a lot about AT and having to do times and stuff. But the problem is it runs once and you're done. I mean, you can set it to loop kind of, but it runs once, which sucks because I want to do other things. Now, Microsoft was awesome and it said, hey, I'm going to increase the attacker space for post-exploitation because it's fun to do that, and added scheduled tasks. So now any user, not just system, or an administrator, can now schedule tasks. So I can be in a bunch of different scheduled task frames and I can run as any user. One of the great things about that is it has an on idle flag. So if my C2 only checks in when the user is idle, I dare anyone who does incident response to figure that one out. My jitter is based on the user. On log on. So I just did a post on Cardinal Lineage about having a password filter. But if you can't get to that level, if you have a way to password dump the system, if you do it on log on, now every time someone logs on, you get their password and it dumps to a file. And then you don't have to have anything but your password dumper on there. On start, and this idea is stolen from Mark Baggett, who's sitting in the front row, who does awesome stuff too. So I'll copy my evil binary when the computer starts from my secret location to somewhere that I don't care about, and have it run there. And then when they find it, when the incident responders find that and delete it, the next time the computer starts, it goes back. It's fun. Bypass UAC with Creds. This one blew me away. I told a guy I worked with that this does not happen. You are not allowed to PS Exec as a user to the same system that you're on and get past UAC. And he said, I just did it. I was like, okay. So, as a local administrator, Windows keeps a token around saying, hey, this is a local person, you cannot go higher. But with domain creds, you are allowed to for some reason. I don't know why, it just works. So, if you want to bypass UAC and you have domain creds, run PS Exec. Persistence. Everybody knows Mimikatz and WCE.
Who hasn't heard of Mimikatz?
Everyone's heard.
Look up Mimikatz.
One of the things that people don't usually do is anything more than wdigest. There's a ton of extra things other than wdigest in there for Mimikatz, and Mimikatz is actually built into Metasploit and Meterpreter now. So, so wdigest gives you your AD password. But what if your AD password isn't the same as your Outlook password? Or you have multiple Outlook passwords because you're handling incident response mailbox and this other mailbox and this other mailbox? Well, you get that via the SSP. So TS package, MSV, those all give those. Everyone have Windows 8 machines now tied into their .NET accounts? No? Thank you, good. So Live SSP is where you can get those. Anyone know what character set they're restricted to? 14.
No.
Oh. Maximum password of 14 characters.
You know, for that, a lot of times you'll end up in an x86 process on a 64-bit. To do this, usually you need to get into a 64-bit process. So that stuff will look like it works and just give you a bunch of gibberish, and you just need to get into a 64-bit process.
Passwords through process dumping. So Mimikatz is awesome, but what if you don't want to put your evil binary or your interpreter on the system, or has application whitelisting or whatever? Well, process dump, all you do is throw process dump on it, you dump LSAS's process. So procdump is a Windows sysinternals tool signed by Microsoft. So you throw it up there, you dump LSAS, you pull LSAS, a copy of LSAS, which is usually around 40 megs, so it is big for a C2 to shuttle out at you. And then you run Mimikatz on your system against it, and it gives you all the passwords. So it's just reading memory, which is awesome.
So that's pretty handy if you don't want to actually get an interpreter shell in the box, so you can just do that.
Yeah, or there's application whitelisting or whatever.
Old Reliable, who still uses Old Reliable?
Run keys!
Run keys, put a binary in startup. That should not work, but it works on almost every test.
How many people still know where their startup folder is for all users on Windows 7? Windows 7. I saw hands go down. Yeah. It's still there.
It still works. It's ridiculous. Everyone should have a GPO that looks for that and just deletes anything that's unexecutable, but they don't.
setHC utilman. This is my favorite, persistence method. So setHC and utilman are things when you hit shift 5 times, you get that prompt saying sticky keys. Windows use the utilman or utility manager, which helps you with other things. But the problem is, you can't replace the binaries without rebooting the box. I mean, there are ways nowadays to do it. I read a couple blog posts about it, but pretty much there's no way to do it. And there's also this really annoying thing that requires me to authenticate before I get to GUI called NLA. I don't like that either. So to make it so that I don't have to reboot, I use this thing called image file execution property things options. I make a registry key that says, hey, setHC's debugger is my evil binary, in this case. Calculator, as everybody knows, we all use calc as our C2, right? Okay. So you hit shift 5 times and calc pops up instead. Cool. Now, instead of it executing the real setHC, it's executing calc as its quote-unquote debugger. Awesome, no reboot. But I still have to authenticate to that stupid NLA thing. So first, I want to make sure that RDP is enabled, and then I can disable NLA with a single registry key, changing it from a 1 to a 0, without reboot. So I make one registry key change, and now I don't have to authenticate. So now when I RDP to that box that I've popped at one point, I hit shift 5 times, I get my shell back. Yay! And there's the firewall exception. Teredo IPv6 bind shell. This is the revenge of the bind shell. So Teredo tunnels out to a Microsoft server, gets an IP address on the IPv6 internet, which is tunneling through your instant response, your firewalls, your everything else, and gets a public IP address assigned by Microsoft, and then I talk to it.
Useful? Alright. Give us the finger, do something.
Is everybody's like, there we go, we got a finger. How about rename on next reboot? This is a not very well documented, like the very few people I could find talk about it, where it's all in Russian for some reason. So pending file rename operations is a registry key that is used by installers mostly. It says, hey, I can't edit this file right now, but on the next reboot, move this file into that location.
Oh, thank you.
So, if I ever, it's limitless, but let's just say I want entityS.dit. Well, that server has to be rebooted next time the patch for Microsoft comes out, right? So I just have to wait. All right.
So who does this? Who exports the wireless configs? Right? So what can we do with that? We show up and just connect.
You can do both copy and move.
Next.
Wait.
I did it.
Yeah, but that should get some more reaction than I heard.
I thought that was awesome.
So this is not not just a clear text password for the current wireless you're on. This is every wireless that you've been on that system, including the certificate client side that you use for your wireless like enterprise. All right, this is awesome. Who did this? Security panel. So this has been floating around. I apologize if I'm not exactly sure who this came from, but so with this one line, if I change this to go into like a registry or an Autorun or somewhere, it will run PowerShell and go get my shellcode and run it, or my PowerShell script or whatever. Yeah. So I can change that whenever I want, and my persistence is, or I can have it on a Google Doc for one instance, or Pastebin or whatever, and I keep changing that. And now every time my C2 check-in happens on idle, it now pulls down a new fresh whatever. So if my C2 stops getting out to a specific IP or a specific port, I switch that up in my stuff, and now it goes out another place. Cool?
Yeah.
So stole this from Mark. All credit goes to him. You can use who uses BITSADMIN to do nifty cool shit. One person.
Oh, come on.
You're awesome. So some commands to show you that you can use BITSADMIN to create a job. So that's that first line there. And it shows we created a job with the GUID. We can add with the add file and the job name or the task name, we can say where to grab like a binary or something else and where to put it. And it will do that. That's down there at the bottom. Is this getting useful? Yeah. What's cool about BITSADMIN? If like things are slow, like boxes being busy, it'll wait and just do it when traffic is.
And if it only gets a piece of it, if it only gets a piece of your evil binary and it's stopped for some reason, it will keep trying and get the rest.
So we can set the retry delay. So we want to maybe do this daily, perhaps, or other things. So set the time to daily, and then that down there at the bottom we can see the retry delay that many seconds, which is a day. And then to actually execute the thing we downloaded, we can say, well, I want to notify I want to do an action when I'm successful, and the action will be to actually run this binary. So set notify command line, the job name, the path to the binary that we downloaded, and null. Basically, when it successfully downloads that, it will go ahead and execute that for you. So, Mark, awesome job. Sweet. Just check out the blog. There's a blog post down there. There's actually a couple different things he's doing that are really awesome with BITSADMIN in addition to that.
So dump password filters requires a reboot, but so password filters for enterprises allows you to say, hey, I want you to have a more complex password than X. I want you to have 17 uppercase, 3 lowercase, and 5 pound signs. So the way it does this is and this is built into Microsoft, and it's a Microsoft ability for Active Directory and Windows. So you dump this DLL that does all of this into System32 and tell Microsoft, or tell Windows, hey, I have a new notification package that needs to be notified every time the password is changed so I can check against it. Well, it gets the clear text password and does whatever you want to it in a DLL that you can dump and name whatever you want. So what I did was essentially said, hey, I wanted to try and use that username and password to authenticate to me, my server, in base 64. So every time a password changes on that system, it sends me the password in base 64. Encrypted base 64. Wouldn't want stuff leaking. So that's great, but you also can log into a file and do whatever you want. This is the DLL that you create, and it gives you these 2 variables, is the username and the password. So, cool?
Yeah.
Well, as soon as I came out with this stuff, there were people that said, I can do it better. So this is a PowerShell script that does this without a reboot by hooking the call to change password. So cool thing about the change password and the password filter stuff is, well, the bad thing is, it only works for local users. Well, if you do this on a domain controller, and you do it in memory, for a whole month until that password, that computer's rebooted for patches, you get all the passwords. Fun. And it's all in memory. Cool stuff? Alright, so I was, of course, one-upped again, and said, hey, I don't want just to change passwords, I want every single logon. So the guy from Mimicat said, hey, I can do it here, and did it in a night. 24 hours. Asshole. So you take the DLL, you compile it, drop it in System32, do the security packages instead of the notification packages, and then you just wait for every single logon. So the cool thing about this is you put it on one box, a local machine. When the next time it reboots or gets used, every time someone logs on, domain, doesn't matter, you get the username and password. So guess what the next step is? Hi IT, my computer is just not working. Can you log into it real quick? It's just not working for my account. Thank you. All right, so we talked about a lot of fun stuff. This blows my mind. So, how many organizations allow VPN tunneling out of their network so that people can tunnel, right? You're all lying. Everyone hands down is lying. Right, so PPT is one of those methods that most people have pass-throughs for, which bypasses their firewall. So, if I am on a single machine, I run this Metasploit module, it creates a PPT tunnel to me and advertises your enterprise networks to me. Great thing about this is a Microsoft tool. This is Microsoft functionality, so guess what it is? Resilient.
And whitelisted.
And usually whitelisted. So I wait until you go home, connect to your network again. Oh, then you went back to work, it connects to me again. Oh, you went home again, it connects to me again. And I have nothing running on your system. It just has a profile for PPT that advertises any network you're on. Thank you. Now I can do whatever I want whenever you connect to me. Great. Makes my life easy. Or you can just be rude and annoying or as Mark Baggett said in his last talk, just patch it yourself. Or you can just uninstall a patch. So at CCDC, one of the things that I did to get back onto a system was say, hey, MSO 905 or whatever it is, uninstall. Cool, now I can get back on it, thank you. And I had this in a loop in a service. So forced authentication, why is forced authentication fun? Okay, so password filters and stuff give me clear text, but forced authentication allows me to get it a lot more, I guess, would be, or easier, right? So I have to drop a DLL or something for that. Forced authentication is basically the concept of me making it so that your machine authenticates to me, or my machine. So, anyone ever heard of LM hosts?
Yeah.
Yeah. What it does is a lot of cool things, including load a host file from a remote system. It does this as the user. So I can say, hey, load this from me. I can require authentication from my share, and then you authenticate to me, I steal your password or replay it somewhere else, and I'm done. And this happens anytime the host file is attempted to be loaded or referenced. Thank you. This is old school. LNK files. So, if you put an LNK file or a shortcut file with a UNC passwords icon onto a public share, so Bob put it on a public share one time and had 246 authentication attempts within the first 5 minutes. At a hotel. So, it's really easy. You just go to properties, change the icon to using CPath, and make sure it's not there initially. You hit OK. Windows says it's not there now, but I'll let you set that setting anyways. And then when they see the shortcut, it auto loads and nothing is. You don't have to click anything. It's great. Anyone see what I'm doing there? This is just evil. It's too small?
Too small?
So what I'm doing is setting the path variable, and everyone knows how path works. It looks for anything that you don't reference completely with the full path in the path. You got 10 minutes? Okay, so we're gonna go a little faster. So now I say, hey, my path is actually the share, and the rest of the path is fine. So anytime someone tries to get a DLL from anywhere, or incorrectly, or anything, if you run CMD.exe and hit enter on run, it tries to pull it from my share first. So literally, I just wait there on my share and say, no, don't want you, don't want that system, no, don't want that system. Oh, that's an admin system. Yep, here's the DLL, go ahead. So I just wait. Miscellaneous, WinRM, everyone loves WinRM, yeah?
Yeah.
It's awesome. The cool thing about WinRM is that it registers as a unique item inside of Active Directory. So you can literally say, hey, Active Directory, where are all the systems that have WinRM installed? Get it back. Okay, so the IIS thing is that if you have IIS installed, WinRM automatically switches its ports magically over to port 80. And then in the IIS config, it doesn't show that WinRM is listening. So it's remote code execution on DMZ hosts that might have IIS.
Oh.
Just by selecting or going after /WSMan. If you get a 402 where it says, hey, you're not giving me an XML file, any IIS box on your DMZ, I now have basically SMB to it.
There might be a couple people in the Alexa top million that do that.
Like 600 of them.
So injecting CAs, I think Rob talked about this when we were actually in Oslo. Via this post module, you can take your certificate authority, like maybe one from Burp, or anyone that you've made, and inject it in, tell it to trust it, and then you can allow, you can run your own code, you can proxy SSL traffic through your own stuff, and it will be a trusted cert, and then when you're done, you can remove it.
Yep. If there's a binary that you want to run that checks a cert, you inject your cert, and it now checks it against yours. So yeah, it works. WPAD, we're going to kind of keep going. This is the best thing on the planet. It tries to pull proxy settings.
Port proxy, anybody use this? Yeah, it's awesome. Check it out. You can do 4-to-4 mapping, 4-to-6 mapping, 6-to-6. We still have a typo in there, 64 mappings. 66 and 6-to-6. And if you're lazy, someone wrote a Metasploit module to do that for you if you don't want to type it on the command line yourself. There's a lot to it, but it's worth looking and checking out.
So you pull this all together, you say, hey, I want to put a share, I want to put this UNC file, or LNK file on the share, get authentication, but since I'm outside of the network, it's not going to authenticate directly to me. I port forward on the host that I'm on for anything hitting 80. It automatically port forwards out of Teredo. I receive it on my side, so now I get all of the authentication, all 246 in 5 minutes, over 80, over WebDAV to an internal host that is tunneled out Teredo to my host, and I get all those credits. Cool stuff?
Yeah.
Stealing SSL cookies is another thing that Mark talked about. He talked about in his talk, and there's also the blog post. If someone's hitting a site that's SSL enabled and you want to have the session ID, you can, using WinINet, log the cookie. If you want to get all the traffic, you can capture everything they're posting back and forth. So really, really handy. The log file fills up really, really quickly. But
Gmail, internal websites, anything. So breaking in NetNTLM. So the great thing about SMB is it has this NetNTLM v2, or SMB v2, and you get all the creds in this huge format. But most of the time, if you have them authenticate over WebDAV, or any other web service, they're doing an NTLM v1. So if you have a big FPGA box, you can then crack that password down to straight NTLM and authenticate with it. Cool stuff. DEP Exclusions, one of my most annoying features of Windows 2003 to 2008 is if my shell code or something doesn't have DEP into it because I've compiled it on Linux. If I try and run it on a Windows 2003 or 2008 box, it says, would you like to exclude this from DEP? It is an opt-out, right? So one of the undocumented features of sysdm CPL is the ability to add yourself to that list by just one command. So you then run the command on the remote host, it adds it to the exclusion list, then you run your DEP unenabled thing. Zone transfers via AD. So domain admins can run this in as a PowerShell. You get all the WMI objects and get all the DNS records and stuff. Well, that's great, but at that point I'm a domain admin. I don't really care. But this also only gets the computers in that space that are Windows computers. Well, that sucks. There's a lot more to an Active Directory domain than just that. And if I had to go to Active Directory Explorer or AD Explorer, it shows me all of these DNS records. I should be able to get that. Like, I'm logging in as a standard user. Why can't I get that? So I spent about 4 days trying to surf the internet and use ADSI Searcher and a bunch of other tools that have been mentioned recently, and I couldn't figure it out. Like, there's an octal format that all of these records are stored in that is undocumented. So I finally, after 4 days of trying to figure this out, found this one-line blog post that says, hey, I figured it out, here's the script. So there it is, it's in GitHub now. Not mine, GitHub, but all you do as a standard user, run this one PowerShell script, tell the zone to dump and what server to ask. And it goes and says, here is every single DNS record on this domain.
Yeah.
Useful?
Yeah.
So now you have every single pointer record, A record, Unix system that they had to do a static thing for in wonderfully CSV format. And finally, I'm hiring, looking for senior red teamers and regular red teamers, but you have to be willing to work in Richmond or Detroit. Richmond. I understand about the other one. And that's it. Thanks. Useful?
Yeah.